Hello again, friends. So here it is, A Look in the Dark, Chapter 9, The Code, and this is the final part of that chapter. You remember they're looking for somebody else to look after some of this cracking of the, or translating of the information into readable English from Stanhorse Records. Richard Claymore glanced at the old wooden cased clock on the mantelpiece. Listen, friends, I must get on the road to Weymouth. I have an early start tomorrow. Give me a ring if you can think of someone. Oh, and let me know when you are going to the Emerald Land, will you? Will you not stop for some tea first, Uncle Ricky? Not tonight, dear girl. Sort me out a bundle of those papers to work on, will you? As the young couple waved the driver of the Jaguar away, Danny confessed that of all his budding acquaintances he could only think of one who might have time. He was sure he could trust him with the confidentiality side, but he was not so sure about the accuracy, and the man's writing was atrocious. Back inside they decided they must spend the next day at their own pursuits, which in Carol's case meant catching up housework, and for Danny there were writing commitments. They agreed that before they phoned that one possible helper they could sleep on it and maybe come up with someone else. Carol was amused when at 10:30 Danny thought it was too late to ring the man then anyway. In Ireland, Dan, this is early. However, Danny insisted that Bob Pitchell would be annoyed to be called so late. He has to get up early to do school patrol in the morning and goes to bed by 10 every night. How old did you say Bob is? I didn't, Carol, but my Uncle Jeff and him were in the same class, and Jim is 60. Why? Unable to compare the two cultures at all, Carol just shook her head. Then she turned to her husband, brushed back her long brown hair with her hands, and spoke very seriously. You know, Dan, I'm delighted that we've sorted out the code, but I feel like we're a long way from the end of the game. Do you? I know what you mean, love. It reminds me of us climbing that mountain in Wales. Was it Sugarloaf Mountain? Each time we thought we were at the top, we found it was only a rise on the way up to the summit. Taking her in his arms, he said, very softly, looking into the mischievous green eyes, You know, Carol, you really did so well working out the code. I'm so proud of you. Then he kissed her lips very tenderly. Carol stated with typical modesty, when praised, that it was pretty stupid of her not to think of it before, and reminded him that it was her who'd photographed the car and the registration plates. As they lay in bed that night, Danny explained that the trip to Ireland would allow them both to get some time with her folks and to entice some of the more coded records. He also explained that it was his desire to scrutinise personally a couple of the Irish connections with Stanhurst and then pay them a visit. Carol thought that was a great idea, but she was most pleased about the family visit and expressed her gratitude that he had managed to make that okay with Richard Claymore. Danny told her how much he wanted to check out Michael O'Connor, because he makes my blood boil and my flesh creep, and I want so much now how his operation works. But unusually for Carol, she wasn't listening, but was thinking about her mother and father. So when can I tell them we're coming? Sometime next week, I hope. I'll ring them in a minute. It's only 11:25. She really stressed the time. It will make their supper go with a swing. Reaching for the bedside phone and punching in the familiar digits, Carol could imagine her parents sitting at the long farmhouse kitchen table, probably worrying about her uncle, aunt, and the court case. Now she would enjoy altering their mood. In Clapham, Theo Adrius was already sleeping, but not in peace, and the nightmares that disturbed his slumber were vivid images of his poor murdered sister-in-law, but on the shadowy edges of his subconscious terrors there were some hopes amid the fears. At 1:47 he would awake in perspiration-filled horror and shout loudly those hopes, Danny! Carol! Amid the splendour of Normandy House at Chobham in Surrey, so-called Major Stanhurst lay sleeping as soundly as a well-fed, well-loved child. His wife at his side was awake, still angry and hurting from the cutting comments he had made to her some 2 hours earlier. Turning her back on him with contempt, she knew that there was not 1 gram of love in her heart for him, but touching the expensive rings on her fingers, she too had little comfort. She hoped that if she just hung on, he might die. Trying not to cry again, she clenched her fists and felt slightly guilty that she felt no guilt at all in wanting her husband dead. Strange irony, that. If the Major had been aware that in a small Somerset town about 100 miles from his home, a young Irish woman who loved birds had mastered the complexity of his disguised records, that two intelligent men along with her had already begun to translate this highly incriminated evidence, then his sleep would not have come as speedily. In fact, he might well be waiting for the phone call to say that the Greens and Sir Richard Claymore were all eliminated. As it was, fortunately for them, he suspected not a thing. Around the world at midnight, as midnight in England reached out to become morning, a number of live creatures, both large and small, were being captive conveyed to unnatural destinations. A van would, not long before dawn, leave a major British port, carrying to a destination in the home counties, hidden under some ripening fruit, more than a dozen eggs. Eggs from rare African birds, eggs taken from nests in the wild. Even as Ch9 slept, he was playing Monopoly with the planet's finely balanced ecology. This man who had no conscience at ordering the death of a woman was not about to lose any sleep because his bank balance was growing at the expense of what he thought of as a few dumb animals. So, different aspects of this story. Worries for Carol about what's happening in her family in Ireland. Northern Ireland troubles have to be in this story because it's part of Carol's life. Danny's preoccupied with his annoyance with this illegal bird trade. Theo, he just wants some revenge for his sister-in-law. And then there's Sir Richard Claymore and his willingness to hand out money to get this job done because of his passion for birds. And then there's Stanhurst. What an animal that man was. And around the world there are many who profit from the illegal trade in animals and birds. Isn't it sad? Such a beautiful planet and so much destroyed by evil people with evil motive. Hope you're enjoying the story. Thanks ever so much for listening. I appreciate it. And Kate and I would like to send our love to every single one of you. Thanks now. Bye bye my friends. Bye bye.